looks like.
Yes, so I think you should go ahead with the recap. I'll wait for more people to join and then go into the agenda for today.
Okay, thank you so much. I would share my screen. I really would love to hear from everyone. So please feel free to.
Ayomide was here last week. Ayomide, do you want to say something?
Hello, ma.
Hi, Ayomide.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. I wasn't opportune to be here last week because of something. So it's my first time in this masterclass.
It was an Ayomide, but not yours.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so please stay till the end today. You'll surely learn a lot from the session.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
One interesting thing I would like to, I hope everyone here today is ready to get their hands dirty. You would have access to a lab environment, and as we walk through the lab environment, I would also leave you behind with things that can help you continue after this session. So let me dive into this. Camera is going off. You should see my screen, and let's go through a very quick summary of what happened last week. So last week was basically day one, and what we did in day one was sorry, please let me know, is there any background noise coming from me?
No.
Okay, thank you. Just 1 second. Okay, so what we did in day one was we basically went through what threat protection means and some of the areas which we use technology for threat protection. And the focus here is using a solution I'm very familiar with, Microsoft solution, but it's also based on industry guidance, evolving threats out there, and how we use this technology to solve the problem of cyber attacks. And so, from a recap point of view, we touched threat protection. Now, an SIEM or a SIEM, we would go through what that is in just one slide. It gives us, just a brief definition or a brief description of what it is. And all these 4 areas you see here were what we did last week. We even, I think, did a little bit more by just dipping into the portal itself. But today we're going to do a lot more focus on accessing the portal. So let's try to get ready for that. So we were talking of what a SIEM is, and it's basically a solution that helps you analyze security events that come from any sources. It could be endpoints, it could be devices, it could be your identities like your credentials. As long as you can gather security information using a solution that can analyze it, and the purpose for this is for auditing, for compliance, and eventually for security. Such solutions are called SIEMs. And because the world of security has evolved from the traditional, let's just protect devices, let's just protect network. It now comes to let's protect whoever is the identity that sits also and controls all these components. And so it has become very important that whichever detection tool that is being used, whichever detection tool that is being planned for, should be able to do detection, should be able to do response. And over the years, we've been having detection and response happening on the endpoints. But today's evolving threats requires detection and response happening on any kind of entities, any kind of devices. If you have things on the cloud platform, if you have things on your network, you want to be able to have an extended way of detecting and responding to any threats that are found on those entities. And that's where detection and response has kind of moved from being endpoints to being anything that can throw out signals for you to analyze. And where this fits into a SIEM is you want to be able to gather all this information and have it in one place. And the solution we use for SIEM in Microsoft is what we'll be going through, which is Azure Sentinel. The other thing we discussed was the principle of zero trust. It could sound like a harsh combination of words, but then it's really is why there's a reason why we have to start moving away from being able to trust based on what we know, but have a system that puts in validation at every point in time. So whoever you say you are just needs to be verified. It's not distrust, it's really verification. And so it removes assumption. The principles really fall on, let's take out assumption and let's verify anything that needs to be verified within an infrastructure, within a system, within a process. It's a principle you can adapt even to everyday life, as little as verifying information that you consume. You really wouldn't want to accept anything you read, maybe just because of who sends the information. You would want to question the source, question the intention, and validate if the information is correct. So that principle of zero trust moves us from just assuming to verifying. In security, it moves a step further by saying, once you are having this thinking of removing assumption, you also need to be able to set up, have a policy-based approach where you can easily identify and grant access where needed. You can't do it in a manual approach, especially dealing with the volume of signals that you might need to verify or the volume of verification that you might need to perform. So what you do in this case is you have a policy-based approach that is kind of a guiding principle, and you only provide access or privilege that is required. It's called the least privilege model, where the least privilege access model, where you only give access that is required. And if additional access is required to access information, for example, then you would grant the additional request. And then the last piece of the zero trust principle comes down to what we call the assumption of breach. So just assume that you are vulnerable. Assume that every part of any system can be bypassed, can be exploited. Having that thinking keeps you alert, keeps you conscious, not exactly anxious, because you are doing your verification, you are using a policy-based approach, and you are granting only the required level of access. But then just that thinking puts you in a cautious mode, and it helps you improve on ensuring security. So in that mode, you start bringing out solutions that help you constantly verify and validate. So when you see things like one-time PIN, yes, you've put in your credentials, and then you need to revalidate that it's you by having a one-time PIN, for example, or by using a biometric method to verify that you are the one, using a device that you have previously registered or a phone number you have previously registered. You bring in known entities to eliminate the assumptions. Someone just, I don't know if it was a mistake, but there was some background noise. But feel free, if there's anything you will need to say, just feel free to speak up also. So we did that, we talked about that last week, and we applied this principle to basically everything that defines your estate. Identity, devices, infrastructure, your network. Network used to be the very traditional way of protecting information, protecting assets. So back in the days, what you have is, and you still find it in a lot of places, you have a firewall, and the firewall is protecting things that are inside within what you have defined as your boundary. So the next generation firewalls or traditional firewalls are basically available to say, let's protect what's inside, and but then how do you protect when inside has become outside? You are using cloud services, you are having people access from the internet, and so your boundaries have become a bit borderless. The entities that interact with data, with infrastructure have expanded. And so the firewall approach doesn't really work. If somebody is going to take down an infrastructure that's within a building, it's very easy. But what happens when everything relating to the infrastructure is really outside? And so this method of building a firewall, this red bricks you see here are actually walls that are fire resistant, and it used to be used to protect what's within the house. But things have kind of changed. So instead of having just a firewall that protects inside, you start putting protection on everywhere you leave your footprint, or every access or every path that you need to take. So just in a nutshell, what zero trust really focuses on is you never just trust, but always verify. Assume every resource you have is open. Assume every resource you have can be accessed from outside your environment, which is like from the internet. A good example is today. Right now, none of us are in the same physical location. We're in different places, accessing from through different means. And lastly, is to change the thinking and realize that identity has moved away from just being a component. It's protection. Your identity, your credentials, what you use to tag yourself. It could be your device, it could be IP address communication, but anything that really comes down to identifying you and giving you access is the center of how people or anyone can get in to your environment. So we wrapped all of that with bringing in how Microsoft makes this possible, how we bring in this level of protection by using Azure Sentinel as our not a cloud SIEM per se, because it does a hybrid function, and a hybrid function means you are able to have cloud log ingestion and also on-premise log ingestion. Either it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, or it's just traditional devices and endpoints that are physical and sits within a building. And so Azure Sentinel, in combination with Defender, XDR, extended detection and response, really gives you cross-domain protection, that cuts across identities, cloud applications, documents. And so that's what we touched on last week. Today we will, I would allow you play around with the actual solutions. So Defender for identity, Defender for endpoints, cloud app security. As a SOC analyst, you would be focused on, how do we configure these things? How do we set them up? How does it look when it's being built from scratch? And the environment you would be having access to is also going to be allowing you continue your paced learning using a combination of the learning path and the study guide. You would also have access to an environment where you could actually simulate a lot of the scenarios that are in your head. So we will be able to go through that. One of the solutions we also touched on last week, 1 week ago, was to give you an insight into what are those 3 main components of Defender for Endpoint, which is one of the most, I would say, robust XDR solutions because of the features and because of its capabilities. It does include threat and vulnerability management. You have attack surface reduction, where the common attack areas that touches endpoints and applications, you are able to reduce that area by saying, these things are common, and adversaries use these methods to get into and to attack. So you have the possibility of being able to use this capability within the platform. And then next generation protection, self-healing capabilities, automated investigation and response, and being able to, what you would have done manually, next step by step, the tool is able to help you do it in an automated way. And what that does for you is you focus on what's really important. The last component of Defender for Endpoints is it's a mixture of technology and technology people and skill, really, because it's an extension of what you have access to, which is you have access to threat experts who also have an eye on the portal, on your tenants, and they are able to be proactive in detecting threats. As you advance in the knowledge, you would be getting to the level where you would also be kind of a threat expert, because you would be able to understand what threats are, hunt for anything that is out of the ordinary, and being able to immediately plan responses for them. So we did all of these conversations last week, and this week I really want us to continue by having a hands-on approach. I will give you access to a lab. So just for your access to the lab, one of the things I would need here is, I have a list of, I think the list is a few days old, but it does contain everyone who had registered for this session. But what we would like to get from you is, if anyone would need access to the lab, which I would say you should have access to the lab during this session, we're just going to get your information so that you can be invited to the lab environment. So let me do this. I'm going to share a link, and the link I share, you could just drop your details in that link and you would be invited to the lab environment. So let me just a second. Okay, so in the chat window, you're going to have the link to an Excel file. Oh, I saw the notes you created, Joy. This is good. Thank you. Let me see what I can do with the notes. So you would see the link in the chat window, and you can drop your email addresses. I would invite you to the lab. So while we do that, let me also access. Joy, I'm trying to open this notes. I don't have access yet. But while that happens, let me just come back to what we'll be doing today. So we just talked of what we did last week, the evolving security landscape and where technology really plays a role. And today we're going to go through, as a security operations analyst, what exactly would you be playing with from a Microsoft 365 technology perspective? There is some information I would bring back to you, which is, understanding what this knowledge does for you. It helps you improve on your knowledge of security operations using Microsoft 365. Primarily Microsoft 365 Defender, Azure Defender, and Azure Sentinel. And those are the solutions we showed you in a few slides ago. And if you do have this knowledge, in which there is an amazingly interesting learning path for this, if you have this knowledge would help you prepare for the Security Operations Analyst Associate exam. It's an interesting exam, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to walk this journey together. So there are a couple of, the learning path includes a couple of modules, and it's broken down in it's more than 5 parts. Yes, it's broken down in 8 parts. It does start from Defender for Endpoints, which is why it was critical for us to just play around that last week. And yes,
the link is requested for a password.
Yes, thank you. I was going to drop that. So you will have I will drop that in the chat window. Beautiful. So that should give you access. And Joy, if for any reason, if you have a couple of email addresses, you could also drop them straight in the Excel file. You can ignore the name. In fact, I would take out the name tab, because that wouldn't really be necessary here. So please let me know if you can access it now.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So the link is for everyone. Everyone who wants to access the lab. You would have an invitation, and I'll show you what the invitation looks like in a second. So you could just drop your emails and call it that at a certain time you can open up access to the lab.
Okay, so Bamidele is a view only link. It's a view only link. We can't edit. I can't make an edit. It's read only.
Hold on just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so what you can do is, so you can use that. You can use the most recent link, and that will give you the access. Sorry about that. At least I know you're accessing it, so that's good. So once you have once I give you access, you would receive a notification. So I'm not going to give the access. I will just allow us collate some of the information, and then we can grant the access. But the good thing is we will do this together. So the more people accessing, the better for us. What we will use the lab for is we're going to be using the lab for, we're going to touch on each of these modules, configuring and basically doing threat mitigation with Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft 365 Defender. We will configure Azure Sentinel, which is the SIEM in the cloud, but it does cover multi-environment, hybrid, on-premise, cloud environments. We would go through all of those configurations, and you will have access to the lab for about, I think, for the next 2 months. So if you still want to learn and practice having a lab environment while you study this learning path, then it would be very helpful for you. So let me do a quick check on the, okay, so I see some email addresses popping up. At a minimum, I think we would be expecting everyone in this session to have access to the lab. So let me throw this out there. Is everyone accessing this, joining this meeting through a computer? Waiting for your response. Can you hear me? We don't want to have a quiet class today. We also want to, okay. So just newsflash, if you're not accessing this, if you are joining, we'll call it, sorry, you were saying something? Sorry.
I'm just switching up to my lab now, so I can edit the lab. I can add my email to the lab.
Okay, that's cool. So one of the things you would want is, you really will want to try out as we walk through this. As we walk through this together, you would want to try it out. You will still have access to the recording, which is fine. But if we want to do this together, then you would have access to the lab as we proceed. So you are going to receive 2 emails once I send you an invite. The first email is an invite to the Azure subscription, which is where we would play around with Sentinel later on. The second invite is every attendee is going to have a Windows 10 virtual machine that you can play with for the duration of today's session. A couple of the exercises that we'll be doing would include things like onboarding your Windows 10 device to the M365 for endpoint tenants. And so we'll walk through all of that together, and it would be great if we have that access. But you can also do it after the session. The next thing I'm going to be doing here is I would share a Word document, which will be a lab guide. Now, this lab guide would help you navigate the lab itself. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I would give you access to this document, and in this document, it gives you an overview of what this lab is going to contain. Basically, the lab is going to contain Defender for identities, Defender for endpoints, Cloud App Security, Azure Defender, and Azure Sentinel. And when we go through this, you would be focusing on these three URLs primarily: the URL for Azure, the URL for Cloud App Security, and the URL for Microsoft 365 Defender. So you would use this as a guide, and you would be able to see account information in here. So let me give you access to that also.
So I've created the meeting notes. I don't know if you can paste it there.
Now that's beautiful.
Yeah, so if you just scroll up the chart, you see that I created the meeting notes.
I did see it. Let me verify if I can access. Okay, so I'm not able to access the meeting notes, but it's fine. I'm still going to drop this file in the meeting, so you have access to it. So just give me a second while I do that. So in the chat window also, just beside the meeting chat, you would find a tab for files. And in the files tab, you would find the Word document that I just shared. So please let me know if you can view that document.
So I don't have access. I have to request access.
For the document?
Yes.
Okay, just a second. I will give you a PDF version. And that will be much easier also. So you should have the new version just pop up about now. And let me know if you can see it. Okay. So for
so when you're sharing, you have to like there's a drop down. You now say anyone can edit, can download and edit.
I don't have that option here.
So when you drag and drop it before you'd like send, it's more arrow there.
Well,
okay, send it to me personally on Teams to my
the permissions. Yeah. So just send me a chat on Teams, so I drop it in the chat window.
Okay.
There is a possibility you might be sending to, let me see, the Teams for your tenants. So I'm just going to head over there.
Okay, I just sent you a hi.
Okay. It hasn't popped up, but give it a minute. And while that is happening, I'm also going to be preparing. So right now we have 9 people who have included their email addresses for access to the lab. So I'm also preparing that for everyone. To make it much easier, the file I'm referring to is going to be placed in the same folder where we've got the Excel file. So you would receive that link also in this chat window. And that should give you access directly. The title of the file is Hands-on Lab, and that's the lab guide. Okay, so let's do this together. And let me give you, I would say, some familiarity with this. The first email notification you would get that invites you to the Azure tenant is going to look like this. You would receive a mail from MOD administrator, and you would accept the invitation for you to access the Azure subscription. Once you do that, the next thing I would be doing is I would also be inviting you to another lab, but that lab is primarily for accessing a Windows 10 device. So for those who currently are accessing from a browser or from a computer, you would be able to easily just launch a virtual machine and go through the exercises together with in here. So this is what the second email is going to look like. And this gives you access to virtual machines in the lab. So look out for these 2 emails. MOD administrator is what you are going to be seeing once you receive the emails. So let's do this quickly, because this is the fun part. So I'm going to just share my screen right now. And in sharing my screen, this is our Azure subscription. Is anyone familiar with using Azure? How familiar are you with using Azure? You can just wave your hands in the chat window, drop a chat, because being familiar with the Azure, it's a whole new environment that gives you a lot of capabilities. Today we will deal with a bit of Azure Active Directory. We will deal with Azure Sentinel, and then we would also dash into Microsoft 365 security. So one of the things I would do here is I want to invite you into, okay, beautiful. Goodness gave a good response, thank you. So I'm going to invite you into this tenant. And to invite you into this tenant, there are a couple of users that exist in this tenant, but I'm just going to do a bulk invitation. Just 1 second, please. So I would open the file itself. I would open the file itself. And this is a template. So this is the template I'm going to be using for our invitations. And I'm just going to invite the people who registered their interest. So you will get an invitation in a second. Let me just grab some information. I'm preparing the file.
We got a new file.
So welcome to the organization. This will take just a minute. Okay, so I have the file ready and I'm just going to import. Like I mentioned, I think we just have 9 people in here. So it means 9 people will be actively participating in this exercise. So let me select the file and submit. So to view the status, I would see the ones which are successful out of the 9 addresses. And so we have 9 people joined. So these are the names we have today. Please look out for the email I mentioned earlier. Let me show you what the email looks like once again. The email is going to look like this. You will get this message from this address. And please, if you can confirm if you've received the mail so we can proceed. Okay, so I'm getting. Okay, Adekemi has received the mail. Joy, you could help me with maybe every few minutes if there are any additional emails from the chat window you could help populate in the Excel sheets, and then I would invite the additional.
Yeah. Yes, I'm doing that already.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I did create a group also, and the name of the group that was created is called Tech for Dev. And I will be adding everyone to that group. The reason I'm adding everyone invited to that group is the group that has been given permissions for everywhere you would want to go and everywhere you would want to access. So if you look through the documents I had shared for the hands-on lab access, let me open that up for you. The group in question is going to be granted these permissions for you to be able to work, and then you would start accessing each of these sites once I give the access. So I'm just going to add everyone to that group right now. And if we look through the member list, Well, I added myself because I was doing a test. I'm going to do a bulk operation also. And in the bulk operation, I'm going to select a file. That file is going to contain everyone who has also indicated interest. So just give me a second while I do that. I'm just doing some quick copy and pasting here. This is the boring part of the exercise. We're going into the interesting part in a second. So I dropped the information in here, and we will submit the request and view again. And so we would see we have 9 people that have been added to the group. Just to understand the membership of this group, or the roles that this group has, this group currently has the following roles. One second. It's not a member, so I'm going to populate this group and give it the right roles. So in Azure Active Directory, we go to our roles and administration. And for our security administration, we want to be allowing this group access. So here, this is where we have Tech for Dev. And so within the Tech for Dev group, we have every member here as a security administrator. Yeah. Before I proceed, let me just check if there are additional people who have been added. Okay, we have additional people. So we have 2 additional email addresses. I'm going to invite the 2 people. So that we can proceed. So Tosin and Folarin, you will get an invite in about a minute. And so let me just invite you. Bulk operation, bulk invites, select a file, submit, and we would have so we have Tosin and Folarin being part of this. And then the last thing I would do here is invite you to the Tech for Dev group. So just give me a second again. Okay, so we have 11 people right now who are part of this. And so the guidance for you now is feel free to head over to any of these portals, but we're going to start from this portal, security.microsoft.com. So if you open up this hands-on guide, click on the M365 Unified Portal, security.microsoft.com. And it's going to take you here. It's going to take you to this portal. So here I need to know if you can access this portal right now.
Hi, Bamidele. I'm unable to access it.
Oh, beautiful. So you can access the M365
No,
portal.
I'm unable. I'm
Okay.
unable to. It
Did you
says
receive the
this
invite?
account. Yes, I did.
Okay. And you accepted the invite?
Yes, I did.
Okay. After accessing the invites, let's do this. Are you able to access portal.azure.com?
Yes, I am.
With which account are you logged in with?
The account I registered with, the maya.4.gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. So you are able to access with your Gmail account?
Yes, I am.
On Azure. Okay.
Yes.
What message do you get for security.microsoft.com?
It says sign in error. This account can't be used to access the Security and Compliance Center.
Okay. So give it a minute. If you
Okay.
sign out and sign in again, let me know if there is any other person who's having the same experience. If you're able to access it successfully or if you are having challenges. Is there anyone who has been able to access this portal? Okay, so Kemi was able to access. Okay, that's beautiful. Who else can access? I just want to be sure it's not specific to anyone. And anyone who had a challenge with accessing, you could just refresh that page or sign out and sign in again. Okay, welcome. Let me do an invite for you here. Abigail is in the lobby. So we have 11 users and I'm just going to add one more user. Okay. So for access to the portal, those addresses should have access to the portal. If you have any challenges, one of the things you could do is drop the screenshot of the error in the chat window also, if it's anything specific to you. The other piece where you would receive an invite is we do have a lab, and the lab we have right now is going to have a couple of virtual machines. I'm currently synchronizing the lab with the group we created for Tech for Dev. So all the 11 users who have been invited is going to get another invitation to access this Windows 10 virtual machine. And this is how the invite is going to look like. You would receive an invite like this for you to register for the lab. Registering for the lab is going to assign you a Windows 10 virtual machine, and the next action we'll be taking on the Windows 10 virtual machine is going to allow us onboard a device to Defender for endpoint tenant. So we have everyone here, and I'm going to invite everyone. So you will receive an invite right now. And so, like I mentioned, what this invite does for you is it gives you access to a Windows 10 virtual machine. And right now it's creating the environment for you. Once you are able to register, you will have a very similar console with me where you can start up your virtual machine. So we're going to give this a minute. Let me know if you received the invites for the virtual machine.
They still can't access the invites. You're getting 500 error.
So, Tosi, I'm looking at yours. Oluchi, I'm looking at yours. Messi, you have a question. Messi, can you clarify your question? You asked about Azure window.
Please, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I am a Microsoft 365 Defender as the window you are showing to us. So I want to know if it is the same as the Microsoft Azure, because I was having problem with network. So
okay.
Before I later keep me again.
Yes. Okay. Did you receive this for accessing the lab?
Yes, please. I just received it now. When I'm trying it.
There are 3 portals there. Anytime we make reference to the Azure subscription, it's the portal.azure.com. And if we make reference to M365, it's going to be security.microsoft.com. Okay. So what I would need you to do is, did you receive the invite? So Oluchi, I see you mentioned you're connected with your phone. What I need confirmation from you is if you received the invite but you can't access the lab. For each of the invites, you are going to accept the invite. And for the lab, you are going to register for the lab. So let me know which of them you were able to do successfully and which you had a challenge with. Bringing them. Yeah. So on the left side of the screen is going to be the Azure invitation. On the right side of the screen is going to be okay. So this is virtual machines. So left side of the screen is the invitation to Azure, and you have to accept it. Right side of the screen is access to the lab. You have to register for the lab. For the Azure, if there is anyone I saw the screenshots for the lab. Let me hop into the lab. So for the lab, it's still in the process of creating. So just finish the registration. Once it's finished, you will have access to the lab. And then what I will do is I'm going to task. I want to onboard the device to the Microsoft 365 tenant. Now, remember last week when we talked of how do you onboard to the tenant? On the portal, you head over to the settings. Then endpoints. And then onboarding. So the approach we're going to be using for onboarding is you're just going to download this package for Windows 10, the package that says local scripts for up to 10 devices. So I'm going to download this script. It's going to be sitting somewhere on my PC. And that's the script I'm going to take over. That's the script I'm going to take over to the virtual machine. So I'm going to put this here. I'm just saving the script. I'm going to start up my virtual machine. So I do have 2 virtual machines in this lab, and I will show you what the 2 virtual machines are in a minute. So this is a Windows 10 virtual machine. I have also included the credentials to access the virtual machine in the hands-on guide. So logging in. Sorry, just a second. So this is a Windows 10 virtual machine. And then I have another virtual machine here, which is going to be, you are not going to be accessing this virtual machine, but it's created as a domain controller because we're also going to be simulating something from Active Directory. So I'm going to power on this virtual machine. And once it comes up, I'm going to connect to it also. Let me hop into the chat window to see what's going on. So Maya, which account are you logged on with? I see the 500 unexpected error. Tosin, let me just call out everyone who has an error. So Tosin, Maya, who else has an error? Tosi and Maya, you still have errors?
Hi, Bamidele. I think that's from what the error we are seeing, sign-in error. We are currently signing as live.com, maya.ford85@gmail. Click below to sign out and then sign in using an Office 365 account. So I think maybe it's just exclusive to Outlook accounts. I might be wrong.
Well, so that account, when you are registering to use that account is going to be used. It's going to register that account. Here is something else I would do for you.
I have an Outlook account, so probably maybe I can use that.
Okay, you can share that. I would invite you with that account here. But it should allow you, and I'm going to also simulate that right now. So I'm going to do this with my Gmail account. And I'm also inviting your account here. So you would have received an invite. So just so that okay, there is another Hotmail account. Okay, that's beautiful. Please, is there any other person here who needs me to add another email? Or I would create a generic email specifically for you just to access this, and you would manage the credentials.
Hi, I'm now trying to log in, so I haven't yet been thrown an error. I'm hoping I wouldn't.
Okay, what account?
But then if miss@gmail.com.
Okay, okay. So I'm doing the invites as they come in here, and let me also check if there is any invites. Okay,
Yeah,
it is the
new
same.
emails there. Some Outlook emails that I just dropped now.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I've added new emails to the OneDrive.
I did the same. Okay, so those emails I've already invited them. Yeah, so I've invited them. I was seeing it in the chat window, so I just brought them in. Let me confirm. Money G. So the invites for the lab also you will be receiving. Messi. So Messi hasn't been able to access the lab. Here's what I'm going to do for you, Messi. So Messi, I would give you, you're going to somebody else. You are going to be Christy Klein. Do you like that name?
No problem, as long as I'm able to access it.
Oh. So here's what I'm going to do. This is going to be messy. So for messy, let me share with you this. And so let me just add Christy to the group. And let me also reset the credentials for Messi. So there's going to be a temporary password. This is for Messi. If there's any other person that needs an account, let me know in the chat window. I will start making you, giving you different personas.
Hello, Bami.
Hi.
When you log in, am I supposed to see something? Because I see my apps and Contoso demo.
Yeah, so you can close that page. You can close that page, and what you would want to do here is you would want to access any of the links, either the Azure portal or the security portal. That's what you would want to access. So you can close the link that gives you my apps.
Okay. And the link to the security portal.
Yeah. Did you get the link that includes the hands-on lab documents?
Was it sent today?
Yes, so I'm sending it again in the chat window.
Okay.
It's in the chat window. It's a folder.
Okay.
So I've just dropped it in the chat window again.
Okay, absolutely.
And it should take you to this folder. So access the hands-on lab guide in there. Okay. Now, for the registration, has anyone been able to successfully register for the lab?
Hi, Bami.
Hi.
This is Tosin. Please, I'm still getting the same error message, even with the
What
new
account are you
email
logged
I
on?
sent. So you just sent a new invite to me, emoji@outlook.com.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm still getting the same error message on the security.microsoft.com.
Let's do something. Can you share your screen?
Okay.
Okay, so let's do that quickly. It'll be interesting if the two emails are giving you the same error. It'll be very interesting. I suspect, but let's see something. One of the things you would want to see is when you log into the Azure portal and you click on subscriptions, you should see you have access to the Azure Pass sponsorship here. And if you come over here and switch the directory, you should also see the directory here. So let's see your screen and let's see what's going on.
Okay.
While this is happening, I'm just going to make sure this other are you able to share your screen? I also see Ayomide has something to say. Ayomide.
Hello, sir.
Hi, your hand is up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, sir. I got to enter into the Microsoft Azure. I can see myself there, like It's already in that page. That page you showed us before you took the stuff off. That subscription page.
Okay.
So I'm there. It's working here.
Okay. That's
Yes.
that's cool.
But the thing is, registering for the Azure Lab services, it says that all virtual machine has been claimed. Please contact the lab owner to increase the capacity of the lab.
Okay.
That's what's showing me.
Looks like they're talking to me,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now.
Okay.
All right, sir.
Can't see your screen yet.
Okay.
Can anyone see? Okay, it looks like it's about to come. Okay, yes.
Okay.
So you received this. Can you sign out?
Okay.
Let's go to the mail where you received the invite, or go to where you have Microsoft Azure, that portal you have opened. Okay. Can you go to the home page of portal.azure.com? Okay, and then subscriptions. Okay, so this is good. The security and compliance tab, let's go to that tab and close this.
Okay.
Okay, so let's open another tab and security.microsoft.com. Meanwhile, there are 2 people who I know have been able to register for the lab. I see it reflects here.
Still getting
Okay.
the same.
Click on sign out. So what we will do here, Tosin, is rather than dance around this, we're going to give you a new persona.
Okay.
I want you to choose a name. Would you like Deborah? Would you like to be Deborah?
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank
Today,
you.
Deborah. Now, the interesting thing is, or let me do it this way. I would give you Tosin. That's fine. I'll give you Tosin.
Okay.
Already so much time has passed since this has happened. The least accommodating we do is try to get to the bottom of it. I think that's what Pelosi said should be at versus negotiating with the frontiers, taking seriously the key points.
I want to pivot the conversation to something I saw on Searchlight.
Tosin, I will give you something you wouldn't be too worried about.
He was side by side with Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who's been extremely critical of him, or a Trump acolyte. Both of these men praising each other. Alice, at this point, does it take a tragedy for both nations to come together to help people?
Tosin, this is going to be your address. Was Christy able to access? Were you able to access with that account I shared with you?
And seeing Governor DeSantis and President Biden work together and getting all of the assets on the ground, it's important. And whenever there's a family and a couple goes there, they're there to show empathy and compassion for victims, but also
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I have them as Tosin.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I have the same problem as Tosin.
Who is speaking?
Prudence.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Prudence.
Prudence. Okay. I would create an account for you. I'll give you an account. Just give me a second.
I appreciate the sentiment.
Tosin, ignore the last one and use the Debra account. And I'm sharing with you the password right now.
Okay.
And then Prudence, I will give you a new name.
Hi, Bamidele.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, this is Maya. So I tried looking at the subscriptions, but it says you don't have any subscriptions. So my problem is
I
different.
would need to know which accounts you are using also.
I tried to look at both since you registered the Maya dot, that's a Gmail account, and then the second one, the Hotmail.
Let's stick to one so that we know.
Okay, so the Gmail.
Were you able to log into Azure portal with the Gmail?
Yes, I was.
Okay. So just 1 second. Prudence, I haven't sent you anything yet, right?
Come again.
Prudence, I just sent you're going to be Johanna.
Okay, okay.
I'm just giving you interesting names, and the credentials are also there. Okay, so Maya, which account did you mention you were using?
The Gmail account, the Maya.Ford85.
Okay, and you accepted the invite?
Yes, I did.
Can you share your screen?
Okay. A minute.
Do we need to log into Azure with the new credentials you sent us?
Yes, you have to.
Okay.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have access. And so when you log into Azure, that accounts that you were given actually does have email. So if you go to the email, outlook.com, for example, you would see the invites, you would see the same thing you would have seen in your account. You would find them there. And then we would have to go ahead to start accessing the lab. So the M365 lab at least.
I'm sharing my screen now.
Okay, I can see your screen. So okay, yeah. So can you click on the top right where you have your Gmail? Top right. Correct. Switch directory. And that's it. Select console. So first one.
Hello? Sorry, I didn't get you.
Select console.
Okay.
Yeah, and switch. Yeah, You are in. On another tab, can you open up security.microsoft.com? So you can't use this to access, okay?
No.
Can you log in with the Hotmail, the one that was created for you?
Okay. How do I log in?
So go back to the Azure portal, and then you can click on the name again. Sign in with a different account.
Okay.
Yeah. Here, no, in the Azure one.
Okay.
And then can you switch? Let's check the directory. So go back to the top right. Switch directory and
no directories found.
okay. So I don't think I invited this account, this Hotmail account. Yeah. Can you type the name in the chat window?
Oh, sure.
Prudence Tosin, are you able to log in?
I don't see any SAP. I'm able to log into the Azure portal. I'm not able to access the security center. It doesn't show any SAP.
You changed the directory.
Come again?
You changed the directory for the Azure portal.
Are you asking?
Yes, I'm asking.
No, I haven't.
I just want to be sure you can access the Azure portal.
Yeah, so I can access it, but then that's all I can do.
You can do what?
I can access it.
Okay, you can access the Azure portal.
Yes, I can access it.
Okay. And which account are you using here?
The one you gave to Johanna.
Okay, just 1 second. Hannah Lawrence. Just 1 second, I'm trying to verify this. So what we're going to do, I don't want us to, for access, what we would do is let's run through the scenarios and then we will fix access, because you would have access to this lab regardless, even after this session. So we can move the access issues, troubleshooting the access issues, we can move all of them towards the end of the session, but let's continue with the portal itself. Is that okay? If anyone is trying to catch up, it's fine. What I would do is when we finish the session, we can then have those let's troubleshoot access, let's troubleshoot some of the scenarios. In the lab service also, can you see my screen, please?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So in the lab, you can see some people are registering successfully for the lab. Kemi, Anuluapo. So let's just give it, let's give people some time. Let me just send the invite to everyone again. Anyone who hasn't received it. And so the first thing I want us to do, and I would be doing this, and if you are able to do it also fine. If you are not, we will catch up. Okay, I see Mamdi was able to log in successfully. So this is going to go fine eventually. Don't be worried. I'm sending the invites for the lab for those that haven't received. So I downloaded this package. I have the download package right here. And the next thing I'm going to do is, let me show you my virtual machine. So this is my Windows 10 virtual machine. Let's look at the name because it's also important to see what name we have here. So the name of my virtual machine is this. I'm going to just change it. I will give it a name that we can familiarize with. For every name change you have on a computer, you would have to restart the computer for the changes to take effect. So I'm just going to restart this. Another thing I'm going to add about the lab is this is a bring your own lab scenario. So I'm providing this as your lab virtual machines. That's one. Secondly, there are Windows 10 devices in the evaluation lab, which I would show you in a second. And you can bring your own virtual machine. So if you have a virtual machine running Windows, Linux, you can also onboard them. So let's go ahead and do the onboarding. Where is my lab once again? Going to log in. I also have, I mentioned I have a domain controller here. I'm also going to log into this domain controller.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
It's Ayamide. It's Ayamide. I don't
Yes,
know how you got to that point, that virtual machine pool. I don't know how you got there.
Okay. So you will get here if you've been, did you receive the invite for the lab, the virtual lab? Did you receive that email?
Yes, I did.
Okay. If you click on the register for the lab, it will take you to the virtual machine pool.
But then it's saying that virtual machine has been claimed. I said that earlier.
Okay, so that's why I said
claimed that you should increase the capacity of the lab.
Yes, so what's happening is it's creating the virtual machine for you right now. And so I would say have some patience. If we look at the status of the virtual machines here, you would see there are some virtual machines that are running, some are starting, some are being created. This could be yours, which is being created. So what happens is it creates the virtual machine, then it starts the virtual machine, and then it starts running. So anyone who has been able to successfully register is what you see here as either starting or running. The ones that are stopped, it's because there are also there are people who probably are just the machines are just being created, and once it's created and you click on that tab again, you will get there.
Okay, thank you.
So this is, you know, I see a few people have done it successfully. Just give it a few minutes and you'll be able to access it. It's a Windows 10 virtual machine, so the only thing it really gives you is I want to be able to walk you through how I'm onboarding, and it's a process that's not crazy. So let me show you how I'm just going to do the onboarding. The file that I downloaded, which is the onboarding file, I will drop it in this location and it's going to look like this. Remember where we picked it from. We just picked it from the settings and the onboarding tab here. So I would extract this file. And I'm going to run the onboarding package. I will run it by just right-clicking and open, press yes, and that's it. This is going to onboard this device to the Windows Defender for endpoints. Now, how will we know if this machine is onboarded? Remember, the name of this machine is yes, please.
Hi. Okay, so I have 2 questions. I'm a bit lost. I'm trying to, this is Kemi speaking. I'm trying to navigate to this tab where we have the endpoints.
Okay.
Because I went back to my page, I can't see it. Then I tried launching the virtual machine. There's a password required. So
okay. The password for the virtual machine is in the documents for hands-on lab.
Okay.
So there's a document that says hands-on lab, and the password is there.
Okay. Then okay. So how do I get to get to the page where you have where you downloaded the other file from?
So if you scroll all the way to the bottom and come over to settings.
On which of the tabs? On which of the links?
It's on the home page. So this is the security.microsoft.com link. It's also in the hands-on lab. So I would say open up the hands-on lab document.
Okay.
And you would see.
I've clicked on the security tab, and under settings, I can only see email and collaboration and security center. Those are those 2 things I can see under settings.
You don't have endpoints in there?
No.
Okay, so don't worry, just a second. Which account are you using again?
kemiolabs@yahoo.co.uk.
Can you call the email again?
kemiolabs@yahoo.co.uk.
Okay. Do we have this? Bring it here. Okay, this one. So you have the security administrator role, and this role will get you into Defender for endpoints.
Hi.
Hello.
I am not able to access the virtual lab because I don't have an invite to the new email address and it's not in the Outlook inbox.
What's the new email address?
Johanna.
Johanna. Okay, so you have a Microsoft 365 account. That's good. Okay, so I just added you again. I'm just going to verify if I missed anybody else here. I'm going to the chat window. So Johanna, we had Tosin. We had Deborah.
Hello.
Yes, please.
My name is Hi.
Sorry. The audio is a bit terrible. I didn't hear you. I'm so sorry. Hello.
Hello.
So I think it may be your mic. Could you type in the chat window? It's breaking. I'm sorry. So for access issues, give a few minutes. You could even sign out and sign in again. But give a few minutes and we'll walk through this process again. We'll walk through it as much as we can. So just for your reference, the onboarding package is within endpoints, onboarding, and we would download the package right here. And then I copied the package into.
Hi, Bamile. I'm yet to add points on my own end. Kemi or Labs, you were attending to it. Yeah.
Kemi, it's fine. We will troubleshoot the access issues. One of the things we can do, I want us to run through the scenarios. When we run through the scenarios, we can fix the access issues. But just so that we don't get stuck on one tab, it might be difficult to have everyone on the same level of movement. But trust me, we would go through this procedure again. Let's just use this to, I would say, familiarize with the procedure itself. So just have some patience, okay? So I copied the onboarding package to the device and I ran this onboarding package. It gave me this screen, and as soon as it gave me this screen, it tells me the status. So the service was started, the onboarding operations, and if I press any key to continue, this just goes away because the onboarding is complete. Now, once the onboarding is complete, if we come back to this page and we go to the devices, we're going to see my device now being onboarded. So my device is onboarded, and I know and I can tell that anything I'm doing, at least I have full protection. There are a couple of other things I'm going to do to configure this device, and I will show you how we would get that done. So let me bring this back here. I I had okay, so there are more virtual machines being created. So anyone having access issues, there are more virtual machines being created. By the time we're at the end of some of the scenarios, we would be able to run through this all over again with each person. So my domain controller is here. I'm going to log into the domain controller. Before I proceed with the domain controller, how many of you are familiar with the operations or the function of a domain controller? Silence in the house. Okay. Let me give you just a quick brief on a domain controller. Yes, please.
So hi everybody. So I went through the Microsoft package. You said we should go through. I can't remember how you said it, but I think you said we should go at our pace. So I went through a couple of videos and such.
Oh, great.
And the domain controller basically verifies users on computer networks.
Okay. Okay.
From what I remember.
Okay. No, but that's because I started my journey into IT learning technologies like Active Directory, Microsoft Exchange, and over the years, a lot of those solutions have evolved into hybrid solutions and cloud-only solutions. So anytime we're talking in Azure and we're making reference to Azure Active Directory, it really started from Active, and this Active Directory in the cloud. It really started from Active Directory on-premise. Active Directory, which is an application running on a server. And what Active Directory basically does is it stores, it's the identity house. It's the identity store where you have users, you have groups, you have computers, and in any enterprise environment or any environment where they deal with users, computers, groups, granting access, passwords, it's based on Active Directory. And so it's a very powerful application that helps you, manage users, manage groups, manage devices, manage access. Remember, we also mentioned identity is it has become the control panel of security. So within an identity space, you would be having Active Directory, you would be having user accounts. You have the ability to create more user accounts. Anyone who is using an email address, logging into anything is basically authenticating an identity. And so Microsoft's technology for identity is Active Directory. Fast forward to a couple of years now, the cloud version is Azure Active Directory. So one of the things that I did in this lab was to set up an Active Directory environment. And so we want to set up this Active Directory environment because in Defender for Identity is a solution that gives you, and I will bring that up now, is a solution that gives you protection and is able to do detection on core components. And that's what you will see in here. So when we talk of identities, we're talking of Azure Active Directory, we're talking of external identities, we're talking of on-premise identities. and that's where you get Azure Active Directory and the actual on-premise Active Directory. Let me just show you what that looks like in a very familiar way. Yeah, so just 1 second. So the accounts, for example, I'm logging on with is this account, and you have a couple of things you can do. You could reset the password, you could add it to a member of, there are just a couple of things that do happen with Active Directory. So here I have an on-premise, let's call this an on-premise Active Directory server. And I also want to onboard this device. But there are two ways we're going to onboard this device. We're going to onboard this device to Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, but we're also going to onboard this device to Azure Defender because we want it to be protected, and we're going to use it at some points for Azure Sentinel. The last thing we're going to use it for is we're also going to have it with Defender for Identity. And Defender for Identity is the solution that really handles identity for Microsoft 365 Defender. So right now we can go through the process of onboarding this device, but just give me a second. So just to verify, we only have one device, which is my device. When we talk of the capabilities of Defender for Endpoints, it really does show its information in things like having a software inventory of whichever devices are onboarded. It gives you security recommendations where if you want to have situations where, are there vulnerable software, for example, you'll be able to find some of the vulnerabilities present in here. But because we just onboarded this, we are going to allow it to pull the data, and it's going to take some time. So we would leave this to run. I saw a message from Oluchi. She says, how do I know that I'm logged in because I was just signed out? Okay, so Oluchi signed out where exactly? If you want to log in, if you can indicate which of these portals you're referring to, portal.azure.com or security.microsoft.com, which of them? Okay, I can't hear Oluchi, but let's do something quick. So we have our domain controller set up. And one of the things we want to do with our domain controller is we want to onboard.
Hello, Bamidele, she's responded. Portal.azure.com.
Okay. Can you share your screen, Oluchi? Can you share it quickly? I will just show you how. I think we did it with someone earlier. Oluchi, are you sharing your screen?
Oluchi joined with her phone, say she can't.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. That's fine. We'll come back to that. Now, when we talk about, we've onboarded a workstation, which is a Windows 10 device to Defender for Endpoints. And that's this Windows 10 device. Now we want to onboard a domain controller to Defender for Identity. And Defender for Identity has a portal, which is, let me show you the portal name. bring it in here. It's portal.atp.azure.com. And because it's the very first time we're logging on, it's going to ask us to set up the tenant itself. So Microsoft Defender for Identity, we're about to create the instance and we would say create. While this is creating, let me verify. The name of our domain controller. So our domain controller here is called labdc1. So we can take note of this name because we're going to use it soon. Okay, and we have just created a portal. So the first thing we need to be able to do is we're going to log in. I have credentials for this. So I'm just going to put in the credentials that I have. Just to be sure. The username I'm logged in with is login2. This username here, login2. My domain is labdomain.local. So I'm going to need that information here. I'm going to say lab domain. I'm going to say login2. And I'm adding my credentials. Okay. So I've done this successfully. I have this account in here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I need to configure directory services by installing a sensor. Oh, just 1 second, I didn't save this. Into password labdomain.local and I save this. And so it needs me to download a sensor. It's an easy step-by-step process. So I'm going to download a sensor here. And while I'm installing the sensor, I would also use the access key. Where is my download? Yeah, so I want to save it. And I want to save it here. No, I want to save it here. Okay, so while this is downloading, this is kind of slow. Hold on. Okay, so while this is downloading, I'm going to hop back into a Windows 10 machine. Oh, my Windows 10 machine is currently restarting. So let's it come back up. So download ready. Not yet. So while this is downloading and while this machine is coming up, we're going to go to this portal. Is there anyone that can access this portal currently, the M365, and can see the endpoints tab? Is there anyone in the class that can do that? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you,
Yeah,
sir, but
yeah, I can
then
hear
I can
you.
I've not gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, I want to be sure if there is anyone that can access this portal with endpoints, just anyone. So I use the person as an example for one of the scenarios.
Not yet, sir.
Okay, so that's fine. So this is downloading. Let's go to our virtual machine pool. I'm going to start up this virtual machine. Let's see the progress of this. So we had earlier onboarded a Windows 10 device. The next thing we can do is we can also onboard a Windows server. So if we come to the settings here, like we did before, and we go to the endpoints, head over to the onboarding tab. For Windows servers, this time around, I'm going to be taking a Windows Server 1803 and 2019 because my domain controller here is a Windows Server 2019. So it's a Windows Server 2019. So the onboarding packages are by operating system version. So we have for Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 1803 or 2019, Mac, Linux, iOS, and Android. So this time around, I'm going to download this package also. So for the domain controller, there are two packages I'm downloading, and there's going to be one more at some point. But I'm downloading this package. So Windows ATP onboarding. And I will copy the package out to our domain controller. It's the same process. I would extract it. And I will run the file. The same way to ask Once we have completed the onboarding, it should come up on the portal. It takes about 5 to 30 minutes, depending on network connectivity. And then it starts sending data across. So I'm just going to say yes, and the script would run as expected, all things being equal. Okay, it tells us it's successfully onboarded. We will give it about a minute and we will check on the portal. On the portal, it should also exist. So let's give it a minute. Successfully onboarded, and we're fine with that for now. Okay. Let me just head to the portal. We head to our device inventory. And in a few minutes, our new domain controller will show up here. So we'll be able to see the operating system version and the operating system platform and the version. So we'll give this a few minutes. It says 5 to 30 minutes, but it should happen shorter than that. Okay. This sensor is still being downloaded. It's almost done. So once this sensor is completed, we will install the sensor. This sensor is only required for domain controllers, really, which are sitting on premise. For Azure Active Directory, it's not a server, so you don't need to install a sensor here. It's only for actual machines. Now, while we head over to the Azure portal, so right now we're waiting for the Defender for Identity sensor to be downloaded and we would install it. We have onboarded the domain controller to Defender for Endpoints. In a few minutes, it should show up on the portal. And we're basically preparing the environment so that we can see our devices on the portal. If we want to see our devices on the portal, it's because we want to be able to monitor those endpoints and we want to be able to secure them. And so one other setup that we would go into handling is we would go into configuring Azure Sentinel, which kind of prepares the environment for us to integrate Microsoft 365 to the SIEM. Now, remember when we talked of a SIEM, and this is where it just gives us, it takes us back to the reason why we're integrating Defender for Endpoints, Microsoft 365 Defender with Azure Sentinel. Each of the solutions, Cloud App Security, Microsoft 365, Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoints, each of those solutions have their own portals, and each of those solutions have their own audits and security information. But we want to have what is called, I would say, a single pane of glass, where everything goes into one place and we can manage it. And that's where we integrate it to our SIEM. So in this scenario, our SIEM is Azure Sentinel. And so we are going to configure Azure Sentinel, and we're also going to configure Azure Defender. To configure Azure Defender, we're going to find it in Azure Security Center. So if you search for Azure Security Center here, there is a tab that's specific to Azure Defender. So if we go to the Azure Defender tab, it tells us the coverage. You know, is there anything that has been installed? Is there any solution? We'll come back here later. There's nothing happening in here because we really haven't onboarded much. So let's just review the configuration here. First, in the configuration for Azure Defender, the first thing we want to be sure is Azure Defender is on. And what does Azure Defender give us? We're able to have threat protection. And threat protection, remember we talked of EDR, XDR. Threat protection is what gives you those automation capabilities. So this is what we're really targeting. And we're also going to have full protection for any endpoints that are onboarded to Azure Defender. From an integration point of view, we want to be sure that Azure Defender is integrated with Cloud App Security and also integrated with Defender for Endpoints. So this is just for us to ensure we have these integrations enabled. And when we talked about an XDR solution and being able to have visibility over other platforms, if you have resources that sit in other cloud platforms like AWS or Google's cloud, you could also manage them through Azure Defender. And so this is where you basically connect your AWS account or your Google Cloud account. But this is informational for this purpose. So this is Azure Defender configuration. If we want to onboard any device to Azure Defender, we could download an agent, but then we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, this is almost complete. Let's refresh this to see if our domain controller is reporting. Okay, so beautiful. So now we have our domain controller reporting here. By the time everyone is onboarding their devices to these tenants, you would be seeing your device names come up in here. And that's where we start coming up with the concept of tagging and grouping devices. Anytime you want to tag or group a device is because you have an intention to set certain controls or have certain reports or put in certain configuration for that group. So one thing we can do here is we can create tags and we can create groups. So let me show you a few things we can do with tagging and grouping. We will start with our domain controller. If we select this button here, we're going to see the possibility of doing things like assigning a device value. The description of a device value is based on how important the device is to your infrastructure. So it's recommended that domain controllers or anything that is, any Active Directory component is tagged as a high value device. So we're just going to make our domain controllers a high value device. And we can then make our workstation, which is my Windows 10. Yeah, it's not a high value device, so we don't necessarily need to make it a high value device. But if this is, if this is a device that has a certain value, we can do that in here. So I'm just going to leave it as a normal value device or leave it as it is.
Excuse me?
Yes, please.
When you say high value, do you mean depending on the content of the device, as in what information is on it?
So let's look at it as how critical this device is to your organization or to your environment. Now, A domain controller, if we look at the role of a domain controller, what does a domain controller do? A domain controller basically holds information for an entire domain. So all user accounts, all groups, the permissions you set, it's all being done in a domain controller's console or within its boundaries. And so we classify domain controllers as having the highest level of requiring the highest level of security because of what is contained and what it does.
Okay, so exactly. Okay, right.
It's by the role. So if you have, say, for example, an Exchange server or a SharePoint server or a web application server, for example, another thing you would want to be doing is you would think and say, what's the value of this device? Because you want the Defender tenant to treat the device based on how you have rated its criticality. And so that's where you go about putting specific, you target and say, I want this to be a high value asset. If there is any security alert that's been flagged on a domain controller, for example, it will take it more serious than if it was a workstation because of its impact to the whole organization. Let's say on a workstation like a Windows 10, you see a virus and the virus has been captured, the file infected has been quarantined, but what's the risk of that workstation to the entire environment? The risk of the workstation is probably to a single user. If you have the same threat on a domain controller, what's the risk of that threat? The scope of a domain controller's role goes beyond a single user. It's every user an account, every group, every user that's on that domain controller, that's managed by the domain controller. The same thing goes for maybe a web application server. If the web application server is sensitive, it stores sensitive information, and you see a virus activity or a malware activity on it, you would deal with it and you will handle it a bit different than you will handle if it was just a workstation, which you can, dispose or provision at any point in time. So the idea of a domain controller, I don't know why this keeps breaking. The idea of a domain controller or a machine asset is for you to be able to classify those devices. That's the important thing about it. So rather than wait for this, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to access this from the domain controller itself. We're disposing of these devices, so it doesn't matter what happens. Sorry, just a second. So this domain controller is in Azure, and I will have a better connection. So let me just log in here. Because it's a server. Just hold on. I'll just wait for this. Did it complete? We're going to go into simulating. We're going to simulate some of the threats. Yeah. So let's do something with simulating a threat. We have this device, my device, and we can do something quickly. In the evaluation and tutorials tab, we could just go to the tutorials and simulation. And what we want to do here is we want to simulate certain threats. And so we will run certain commands and we will run certain scenarios within the devices we have. So we can do it on our domain controller. We can do it on our Windows 10 device. The idea is we want to be able to simulate threats so that we see the effectiveness and we generate a lot of alerts on a couple of alerts on the Defender for Endpoints console. So I'm just going to do that now. So this is our Windows 10 device. So here we have the Windows 10 device, and here we have the domain controller. Both of them are onboarded. And for our simulation, I'm just going to pick, one or two scenarios. So here is a script that runs what is called a fileless attack. A lot of malware and a lot of malicious activity today doesn't necessarily need to transfer a file. So I'm going to use this script. I'll copy the simulation script. I would go to my device here and launch PowerShell. And the reason I'm launching PowerShell is if you go through the walkthrough of this, basically tells you what you need to do. So if you go through each of the documents, it tells you what you should run, the philosophy behind the detection itself, and what we expect. So you would also need to familiarize yourself with the walkthrough of a lot of these tutorials, but they are pretty easy. It's prepackaged malicious activity that's safe. There's nothing dangerous about this. And so by the guidance, I'm just supposed to run this command, and we will see the kind of attack and the kind of alerts that comes out from running this command. And we have a couple of we have some other detections in here. For example, we're also going to run this also. This particular one will trigger an automated investigation. So let's do it one at a time. Yep. So this is the comments from it. What that command does is it's a shellcode that's injected into a process. So don't worry. This is one. I'm going to run another one. I'll copy this simulation script and run another attack. And if there is anyone that likes playing with very dangerous things, feel free to use the lab for your scenarios. There's someone that is happy today. Okay. So we've been able to run those two. Just checking this. We have to restore the simulator agents for this. So we've run two PowerShell scripts that behave in a certain way. And we should start seeing the alerts pop up on the screen. So if we go to our incidents, this is where we start looking out for the alerts. And yes, we do have some alerts. You can see the alerts related to my device. And so we can start investigating what this alert is about. This is what a SOC analyst will be seeing, where the SOC analyst will basically, there will be a threat and it would be evident on the console here. So if a SOC analyst comes in the morning or comes, and this just pops up, what you would be able to do is, first of all, you will be able to see the summary of the incident. You would see the alert that is related to the incident itself. You would see the devices that are impacted. If there are any user accounts, you would be able to have the user account. And the evidence tab is what tells you exactly what was seen as suspicious. So in this case, it was a suspicious notepad process. And you would also see any of the IP addresses related to it. Now, this IP address was an IP address that script was trying to make a call to. So let's just go to the alert itself. And this is where you can see the timeline of the alert. So in this case, these are the processes that were running. And this is the point where a suspicious process was observed. The command line parameters that we ran were basically included in here. So in investigating, you have this screen that's able to show you a step-by-step of what happened and at what point it was detected. And you are able to see that here. We also see that there was an attempted communication to an endpoint. Now, what would you want to do as a SOC analyst? When you see there is outbound communication to an IP address and it came from one of these devices, you can take certain actions. You can view if this IP address is related to other systems, if it's related to other processes. And so you are able to take actions based on what you have seen. But we'll get to that go into more detail. So we've seen this IP address and they say it's related to 2 devices in the organization. And you can see the 2 devices. So one device is my machine. And then I did this simulation on a lab machine earlier. But what that also tells us is, if I come to our domain controller here, and I do the same thing, remember we took the scripts from tutorials and simulations, and we used this too. So I can run this, sorry. I want to copy the simulation script, not click it. I lost connection to this.
Excuse me?
Yes, please.
Does it mean that the systems or users connected to that domain clicked on a malicious link, or what's the error?
So what happened was I picked the malicious activity from the tutorials tab here, where there is a PowerShell script, and the PowerShell script tries to act in a certain way. Now, if I copy the simulation script and we say, let's look through it. Let's look at the script. Yeah. Watch this. And so what we see here is, this is a PowerShell script that's trying to access and do what is called a command and control also. Let's assume we can't interpret what this does. It's just a script. It could be something that was wrapped by someone But then, because we have this pop-up as an incident, and Defender for Endpoints was able to identify it, what we can do is we can review the specific activities. So I just went to the incidents. I picked the one here. So the alerts, and I see 4 different alerts. One for sequence of exploration activities, where the malicious activity is basically trying to get do a discovery. And then we're also seeing that a process injection was observed at some point. When all of this was happening, immediately Defender for Endpoints just triggers what is called an investigation. And what it does with the investigation, it says, I've seen something malicious and I need to understand what has happened with this device. And so the investigation page starts doing something. It takes that entity and everything related to the entity, it starts doing an investigation on. If there are any files, if there are any processes, if there are any services. And the investigation basically runs a couple of activities. If you look at the activities it runs, the investigation does things like it checks the machine coverage, it gets the list of processes on the machines, it looks at all active network connections, it checks the IP address, it reads the memory, the process memory, it looks at the files, and what it does at this point is it determines what is malicious and what is not malicious. And when it does all of that, it gives you a verdict on what it sees. Sorry, I just saw. Yeah. So Adelaide mentioned, does Defender also block the attack? Yes, it does, because what Defender is doing is it's checking for the attack, it's checking for the timeline, and it's going to tell you what was done about that. So it detected it, and I will show you one more thing that Defender uses to actually deal with such incidents. So let's just go back to the alerts. There are 4 different alerts. We can see what happened with each of the alerts. You see the suspicious command line. So there's something very important that we need to ensure we have on every tenant. If we go to the settings and we go to endpoints and we go to our device groups. No, let's start from auto remediation. Because we need Defender to be able to remediate anything that is found, we're going to create what is called a device group. And in the device group, we're going to set the remediation level that we expect. So in this device group, I'm going to call this, for example, all devices. And the remediation level I'm going to say is, I want full remediation. And what full remediation does for us is, if you find anything malicious, I want you to detect it, block it, and resolve the issue. And that's what the full remediation does. So if I click on the next, in this case, I'm saying all devices, let's say we're going to leave it as blank because we want it to touch all devices, but you could filter by name, for example. If I filter by, I know I have a device called BAM DC1. If I filter by this and preview, it will show me the devices that fall in that category. If I use a different name and I look at the preview, it would show me if there's anything that matches the name. Okay, this is starts with. If I change this to contains DC, I would be able to see another device. So what I want to do here is I don't want to use any, just want every device to have full protection. So let's just make this have full protection. Let's say the operating system is, we know we have a 2019 and we know we have a Windows 10. If I preview, I should see all my devices. Apply my changes. And what this tells me is all my devices would have full remediation, for example. So now that I know all devices are going to have full remediation, I expect that in my incidents and my alerts, anything that has been found and is tagged as malicious should be treated how I want. So right now we have an investigation still running on this. This is the alert. This is what was found. And when the investigation is done, the action will be taken on the device. That's what is expected to happen. As a matter of fact, we should also see what Defender will do here. So I'll just open up this console. No, not this one. This is our Windows 10 device. And so anything that comes up, we'll see it on this. It will pop up here also. So I'll just leave this open and leave this here. So right now we would leave our incidents and our alerts, and we would allow Defender to deal with it as expected, because what Defender would do is it will treat this and it will report the status. So here we've just triggered a couple of alerts, and we're going to use these alerts in Sentinel. Why is my download not going through? We're going to use these alerts in Sentinel. Right now they are in Microsoft 365 Defender. So let's hop over to Security Center. Let's hop over to Azure, and let's set up our Sentinel workspace. When we set up the Sentinel workspace, there will be nothing in there. Just before we set up the Sentinel workspace, let me show you one more portal, Cloud App Security. So if we go to our Cloud App Security portal, made it here. This is a solution that basically helps you determine your cloud application usage, the accounts that you use and how they interact with the cloud and the risk level in them. So this is one portal where we're also going to be pulling alerts from here and pulling them into Sentinel. You would see that there are a couple of alerts that are already here from Cloud App Security. So a few things we want to do. We want to ensure that the integration with Cloud App Security and Microsoft 365 Defender is in place. So I'm just heading over to the settings, Defender for endpoints, Defender for identity. It's enabled. Azure Active Directory is enabled. I just want to be sure we have what we need. Come back to this place soon. Okay. So now we're in Azure and we want to set up Azure Sentinel. We search for Azure Sentinel, open up Azure Sentinel, and this is the first time we're going to be configuring Azure Sentinel. So we need to create Azure Sentinel, and Azure Sentinel is going to use a workspace. So if we click on our create, we're going to put in the parameters that tell us our Azure Sentinel workspace. What's going to be the name of our workspace? I will call it, so first of all, we need a resource group. I already created one for Tech for Dev. And this time around, we're going to call this underscore Techsters. Not Techsters, doesn't matter. The pricing tier, I'm going to leave it as the default pay as you go. This is a trial subscription, so everything is going to go its natural progression. And so what this does is it's setting up a log analytics workspace that Azure Sentinel would use, because Azure Sentinel needs to drop all its security information in a workspace. And then Azure Sentinel queries the workspace. So every information that is coming from Microsoft 365 here, all the incidents, we want to send it over to Azure Sentinel. That's what we want to do. And that's why we're creating the Azure Sentinel workspace. I would pause here and let me take one or two questions from you, because we just moved from Microsoft 365 to Azure Sentinel. So let me take a few questions from you if there's anything you need to be clear on. I'm waiting.
Excuse me. I remember going through one of the resources and I saw something about I can't remember what package it was, but the packages can lock down the device. And if it locks down the device, does it mean that the device owner can still work on that device, or it's like a total shutdown?
Okay. I would show you what that is. I would show you that in a second. What I've just done is the same alerts that we created, that we triggered, the same attacks we triggered in the Windows 10 device, we're triggering those same alerts in the domain controller. I just want us to generate a couple of alerts that we can analyze. So what you were asking earlier about lockdown, it's actually called, that particular action is called an isolation action. And so what that action does is you can decide to isolate a device with this option. And what isolation does is it disconnects the device from the network, but it maintains communication with Defender for Endpoints, because Defender for Endpoints is still going to be able to manage the device and protect the device. So it locks down communication across all network points, but you have an option while you do this. For organizations that also use Office 365, what this does is when you have the option of isolate, you can actually allow Outlook, Teams, Skype for Business while it's isolated. And what an isolation does is you want to minimize the effects of this exposed device. So if you have a device that has, let's say, ransomware, which spreads across the network, if the right controls are not in place, when you see an alert that talks of there's a ransomware on a device, one of the things you could do is I want to isolate this device immediately. And I would show you what an isolation action can do on a device, because while you isolate, you can also remove a device from isolation. So one of the things we can do now is we can do an isolation. This is my computer, which is the one that was onboarded. And just because I have these alerts on this computer, and I'm the SOC analyst and I'm analyzing this and I'm saying, there's really something wrong with this. There's malicious activity on this device, and I've seen that this is malicious and this is a true alert. So I've marked it as a true alert. I want Defender to do the rest, but there's also something else I want to do. I want to be able to isolate the device, for example. So I can come in here go to the device, and I can trigger an isolation. And I will say the reason why this is suspicious. Now, in any when a SOC analyst is performing this kind of actions, there always has to be communication involved in this. So you are isolating, but you are actually affecting someone's productivity because the person is not able to work. And so if you do this isolation, the person wouldn't be able to access other resources.
Right. Okay. That's what I wanted to get. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, it's very important for the security analysts to have that. It's a level of empathy because while you are dealing with threats, you also need to deal with the human beings who are behind that. You know, some of these threats could be human operated, and some of them could just be because the device is not protected. So in this case, if I do an isolation, I should have triggered a process internally where this user would be informed and be managed. And the user or the support person is not running helter-skelter trying to figure out what just happened to my device. So right now, I just sent an isolation command for this device. And what this should do is it should lock up the device on the network. And I shouldn't be able to do anything after a while on this device. Right now, this device has internet connection. You can see I just lost connection. So I would lose connection because I can't access the device again. I would come here and in the isolation status, I would be able to see that I have isolated this device and now it's changed from isolation to release from isolation. During the period of isolation, you will want to remediate whatever was found on the device. So if it means physically visiting the device or having an instruction where the device has to be rebuilt or cleaned of the malicious activity, that should be happening. And once that is done, you will release the machine from isolation. That's how the isolation works in the whole process of, you know, what actions am I taking on a certain device. So right now this device is isolated and we can't do anything on the device. If we look at the status, it tells us isolation was applied. And I can't log into this device right now. I can't, even though it's still on the network. It's just been isolated. For me to be able to log into this device, I would have to release the device from isolation. So this is the device. If I try to connect, I wouldn't be able to connect at all. This is exactly what will happen to a user who is working on the device. He wouldn't be able to connect if the user is already logged in physically, like, you know, right on the screen. Yes, you would be able to work on the screen, but you would have zero network connectivity. So what I can do here is I can release.
Excuse me, when you say zero network connectivity, do you mean internet connectivity or
local
network as in Lookout and all those other 365 and so on?
Local connectivity and internet connectivity.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so Defender basically controls the network configuration of the device by saying, you know, just lock down the network. And if I had the option of, if we had the other option that does allow Teams, Outlook, the only thing the user will be able to do is Outlook, Teams, and all those. And the reason it's open is because it's a controlled environment. It's an environment we manage, and you have access to the environment. So you, as the SOC analyst, you could allow the user to still do email, Teams. You could even have a session with the user while you remediate the issue. But you have isolated the device at this point in time. And if you are done, you could release the device from isolation. So device investigated. Let me release it from isolation. about that. The incident investigated, and I confirm this. So what this does is it then tries to start releasing this machine from isolation. It's running the action. Remember, the machine is still up. Let me see what happens here. I try to connect now, and now it's giving me my credentials. And I am able to, I'm just bringing it from one screen to the other. It's connecting now. Yeah, and it's connecting right now. It did not restart the device. It just locked down the network connectivity for that device. It locked it down. And if I look at what happened in here, I can see it's released successfully, released from isolation complete. We would see a lot of this information also in the summary, the evidence, and exactly what was going on with the device. So that's what the isolation process does for the device. 1 second. Yeah. And just so I can show you, the alerts we triggered. Now we can see the domain controller also has the same alerts. Remember, what we did was to run those commands on the domain controller. So if I go to the domain controller's alerts, I can see what was happening, the investigations that were triggered, the evidence of what was found, and all the alerts that are related to this. So now we want to move all of this to Sentinel. We want to manage this from Sentinel, because what Sentinel does is Sentinel operates in what is called it does orchestration, it does automation, and it also does response. And what we just did, where we did an isolation, we could actually automate that action. We could automate it here in Defender, but we could also automate it in Azure Sentinel. So here we created our Sentinel workspace. And as we created, remember before we created it, it told us we're trying to create Azure Sentinel. It asked us to create a workspace. And now we're adding the workspace to Sentinel. So we're going to add this workspace to Sentinel. And we have all the capabilities of Sentinel. What we basically need to do is configure Sentinel. Oh, I see Ayomide had a connection issue, sorry. Sorry, I'm seeing the question from Adelaide. Why do we want to connect the two? Please, can you take me back to what that question means?
Yeah, so I think you already answered it. You just answered why.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just seeing that in the chat. So right now we're creating Azure Sentinel Workspace, and we will go through configuring Azure Sentinel Workspace to receive all the information that's coming from Microsoft 365 Defender. That's what we want to be able to do. So
is it because Defender for Microsoft Defender cannot do it? Is that why we're moving to Sentinel?
No. So let's do it this way. What you get from Defender is you get alerts and incidents which have been triggered by, malicious activity, security incidents. You realize, let's look at let me use the illustration of if you have a basket of oranges, and you need to select the good ones from the bad ones. So you would have a basket of oranges. It's a mix of good and bad in the basket. And anytime you find a bad orange, you would put in somewhere else in a different basket, because there's something you want to do with the bad oranges. Maybe you want to find out what's, why did it get bad? What kind of, if you are into botany, for example, you could be, checking if, the reason, if there's anything, if you're into crops, maybe I want to check for, are there any bacteria that was causing this? I'm trying to find out why the orange got bad, or what happens when the orange goes bad. And when you finish with your selection, you are going to end up with oranges that are still good. Now, what do you do with the oranges that are still good? You are going to use them, but those oranges that were good today could end up being bad tomorrow. So you want to have a place where any oranges that are bad, you're able to flag them. And when you flag them, you can investigate them. So our incidents and our alerts are the result of the bad oranges. Those are the things that are giving us concern. We want to deal with those things. Also, your good oranges, you want to always check that those oranges are good. Whatever was making the previous oranges bad, you want to prevent them in the good oranges. So you would see a good orange today that's changed from good to bad, and you are able to realize that it was good before and it ended up being bad. The whole collection of your oranges and what collects all that information is a SIM. It takes every single security event, but what it now does with that is it looks through and tells you which is good, which is bad. So Defender does the first step of identifying good and bad right there and then. It just does it for you. And when it does that, it has information of the good ones, but those good ones are not going to trigger incidents. They're not going to trigger alerts. So all that information you have, you want to send the information somewhere so that there is something that is helping you monitor. There is something you can easily check back and say, let me see what happened with these oranges 1 week ago. Let me see what happened if maybe the rate at which, maybe there were signs that they were going to be bad one way or the other. And so your SIM collects information, no matter the information it collects. Even if there are security, if it's alerts or incidents, it collects everything. Now, what we want to do with Sentinel and what Sentinel wants to do with that data is 365 has already categorized incidents and alerts. It has already given you this information, and you can take certain actions on this information. But remember, your SIM is a repository for additional info. And when we go through the configuration, you will see that it doesn't only collect information from Microsoft 365. You can collect information from other sources. You can collect information from network devices. You can collect information from firewalls. You could have Linux servers. You could have devices that are not reporting to Defender, and you are collecting information from them in Sentinel. Because it's a SIM, it's let's call it a collector of logs, but this time it's collecting security information. Now, what does Sentinel do with the information? Sentinel itself is a monster. It does have the ability to apply machine learning and understand those trends within the logs. It's able to check and say, let me see if what was good today, what is bad today was even good at some point, or has it always been bad? I received another stack of oranges from last week, and I need to check the same kind of things I'm checking with these oranges on those oranges. So I'm just going to throw all of them in Sentinel, and Sentinel will check with the same logic it uses to check what's good and what's bad. So it's the place that collects all your information, and it analyzes all that information and gives you insights on what the information means. And it gives you in different forms. You have workbooks, you have dashboards. And so it's a place where you are collecting Defender, Microsoft 365 Defender alerts and incidents. You are collecting Azure Defender alerts and incidents. You are collecting, if it's a Linux box, if it's a syslog server, you are collecting all of that. When you look at how you can collect information from Sentinel, the very first page in Getting Started shows you how do you collect data. And you really collect data by configuring connectors. So one of the things we will do is before we configure a connector, there are loads of connectors. So before we configure this connector, we're here in incidents, and we can't find anything here. There are no incidents here, nothing at all. But we know we have information here in Defender for endpoints. We know we have information here in Cloud App Security. We have all these alerts, but look, we have to hop from this tab to this tab. And so because we're hopping across those tabs, sorry, just 1 second. Kind of surprised this thing is still acting up. Just give me a second. Sorry. Oh, message in the lobby. Sorry. I just need to start this again. So because it's also going to collect information from Defender for identity. It needs all that information because at some point, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to say, you know, I want to automate how you respond to this information. And I'll show you how we can do some of those automation. So right now, Sentinel is sitting there. There are no incidents. It doesn't have any information from identity, from Cloud App Security, from M365 Defender. It also does not have any information from Azure Defender. We've not even onboarded any device to Azure Defender. So we're going to do something. The first thing we'll do is we'll pull in all the alerts and incidents we have here, and we'll bring it all the way to Sentinel. It's a SIEM. The concept of a SIEM is just send me all the security events, the security alerts, just send everything to me. And so we're going to configure a couple of things. One, the entity behavior. What entity behavior does is anything you send to Sentinel, it's going to use machine learning to discover if there is any information, additional information, and context to that. So let's assume you have a firewall, and in your firewall you define allow, deny rules. You have users that are accessing the internet. If you send your firewall logs to Sentinel, what Sentinel does is it tries to say, I need to have a better understanding of the firewall logs. I just don't want to see IP addresses. Are there any users that use this information? What user account or what identity is tied to this IP address? So it searches everywhere in Sentinel. It searches everywhere in our security graph, which has billions of signals that come in. And then when it does that, it's able to give you insights on that. So we're just going to enable user and entity behavior analytics. That's what it does. The other thing we would do is we will configure the data connectors. Is how do we get data into Sentinel? So like I mentioned, you have lots of solutions. more than half of these solutions are not Microsoft solutions. You can see Aruba, BlackBerry, Checkpoint, Cisco. It means you can configure third-party devices to send their security logs to Sentinel, and then Sentinel does its magic of, machine learning, and being able to give you a single place where some of these events could actually be malicious activity. So for the sake of this, we're going to configure the Microsoft 365 Defender connector. Because what we want to get right now is we want to get Microsoft 365 alerts, incidents, logs from M365. And you can see what it contains: Cloud App Security, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Office 365. So we're just going to configure it, and it's the next thing. So this is what we need. In the workspace we just created, the accounts I'm using should have read and write permissions. It has. In the tenant itself, the accounts I'm using should either be a global administrator or a security administrator. It has. I need the licenses that give me Defender capabilities, which is Microsoft 365 E5, for example, and A5. And here, all I need to do is click connect. Once I click connect, all my alerts and incidents coming from Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, all of them is going to come in here. So fail to add this, I'm just going to select everything here. Great. So now with just this checkbox, I have basically said all Microsoft 365 alerts and incidents should come to Sentinel. And if I look at the next steps, this is where you can actually start searching for information and checking if the information you are importing is actually coming in here. And we'll come back here in a minute. Right now, we haven't received any data. And because we haven't received any data, we're just going to leave it as it is. It will take a few minutes for the data to come in. And if we want to verify, and we click this query, and this is kind of the introduction into using coastal query language, where you are able to query the data you are looking for within the Sentinel workspace. But right now, we don't have data because we just clicked enable. So we're going to give this some time. You can see right now it doesn't give us any results, but then when it starts injecting the data, we would even see it from the amount of data received. Now it's just 000. Now there are loads of other connectors. There are so many other connectors that we can find within here. Lots of connectors. So we're just going to leave this as it is. We only did one connection, but in most production environments, you would be connecting anything you want to send data to Sentinel, so you have good insights. And right now, this is just, let's give it some time. It's going to pull data. Yeah. One more thing we want to do with Sentinel, or in this case, I would say with our domain controller. Let me see this download. This strange download. It's almost done here. Fingers crossed. Yeah. So one more thing that we want to do is for Azure Defender, you could onboard Azure virtual machines and other Azure services, and even on-premise virtual machines to Azure Defender. So if we're looking at what can you onboard to Azure Defender, first of all, we can see this our new workspace. We're going to onboard this our new workspace to Azure Defender. So I'm just going to come here and I would say enable Azure Defender and save. That's all. But then I want to onboard my device to Azure Defender. So I would onboard to, I will go back to my Sentinel. There is an agent that sits on Windows servers and older Windows versions. It's called the MMA agent. And the MMA agent is the Microsoft monitoring agent that also collects information the same way we have the Defender for Endpoint agents. So if we want to onboard anything to Sentinel or to the log analytics workspace, we can collect. I'm just going to use the agent connection. If we go to the workspace settings and we go to agents management, we'll need to download the agents. Right now, we see that there is no computer onboarded. The configuration we've done just brings alerts and incidents from Microsoft 365. But then if we want to put a computer to report directly to Sentinel, we could just download the MMA agents, which is this one. So I'm just going to download these agents. So beautiful. Our Azure ATP sensor is downloaded and our MMA agent is downloaded. So these two. Second. I'm going to copy these two files because I want to onboard the domain controller itself. This is our domain controller. Just going to copy it in here. Last two steps will complete our onboarding requirements for, say, a domain controller. Remember the Azure sensor, the ATP sensor is for domain controllers. The MMA agent is to onboard to Sentinel. The Defender onboarding package is to onboard to Defender for endpoints. Now, if we did not install the Defender for endpoints agents, if we didn't install the onboarding package, if we didn't run it on the domain controller, if we onboard to Sentinel and enable Azure Defender, it helps us to do that automatically. But we had started with onboarding that's the Windows Defender sensor because the download was taking a while. So we're going to allow this to finish hopping over. And let's take a quick check on our Sentinel to see if we have information. So remember the connector was M365 Defender Preview. Yeah, and you can see now we have data being received. Now, how do we view the data being received? Two ways. We can come to the connector page, go to the next steps, and we can just run the first query to see what data we get out. Okay, this hasn't pulled data. Let me go back one step. So let's see the kind of data. So what data is it? Endpoints, Sentinel kinds connectivity, incidents. Okay, so we still don't have incidents and alerts. We'll just wait a bit. But what we have is we're having some of the logs from the device. So we want incidents and alerts. Another way we can find that is on the Sentinel workspace. If we click on incidents, before we had no incidents, we'll just keep refreshing this place. So once the incidents come in here, we would find them in here. So let's give this a few minutes. This is almost done. Adelaide, so the Sentinel is the aggregator of all the data. You're 100% correct. And this is something that gives you a view. Let me show you. Remember this slide? So you have Defender XDR, takes all its information, and you send everything to Sentinel. That's what it does. In your hybrid environment, which is cloud, on-premise, user environment, Office 365, other services, third-party, other clouds, and Sentinel has all the data, and you can have a single place where you can view all information. So very soon, when we start looking at, so our incidents have started coming in. So here we have this same incident. Remember this multi-stage incident? It's the same one we have here, this one. This is how it looks like in Microsoft 365. Alerts, the devices, and this is how it looks like in Sentinel. So the sweet thing about Sentinel is you have an interesting way of even investigating. So we can see the details here. You could check each of them and read the same information. But there is a very nice investigative graph that gives you a quick way you can investigate. I would let this populate. So let's just give it a few minutes. But from Sentinel, remember, you could actually head over to the actual incidents in Microsoft 365 Defender. So if you click this link, you will head over all the way, and it gives you the same place where you had the incidents. So it's connected. That's one thing. But like you said, 100% right, it does aggregate all the data. We search by So we're going to allow Sentinel to just keep running through and pulling as much data we want. Remember, we also want to have cloud app security data. So this kind of information, we expect it. In fact, if I'm not wrong, let's go for the past 30 days. Yeah, we would start having, the data is pulling through, and we will have a lot of data coming from Microsoft 365 and cloud app security. We could check our data connectors again. Yeah, we're getting data, so let's just allow it to pull in all the data we expect. And what happened over here? So Azure ATP sensor downloaded, but the MMA agent did not. It's fine. Install our Azure Defender for Identity Connector. So this is the setup file. It's going to ask us for a couple of things. Basically the primary key. So I'm going to open this. While that is launching, I'm going to copy this again. So I'm just copying the MMA agents. But then let's continue with the installation. This is the installation, Defender for Identity Sensor. We go with the next approach, and it's going to ask for an access key. There is only one place you can get the access key. You can get it from the same portal. Remember where we downloaded the sensor? Copy the access key, drop it in here. Install. Now this is a lab environment. Everything will go smooth. In production, there's only one reason why things will not go smooth: if the prerequisites are not met. So it does require network connectivity to certain URLs before it can access and complete the installation. The same thing happens for Defender for Endpoints. For you to have all the features, you need specific network connectivity. In going through the study material or the deployment documentations, you will find a lot of this there. It's available and it's easy to have configured. A lot of next generation firewalls have the categorization of Microsoft services. And then we also have very good documentation that highlights how you can allow certain access. So once we have this sensor installed, our domain controllers are going to be reporting to this portal. That's what we're going to get. It's going to be reporting to this portal. So we'll let this finish. Where is our Sentinel? Let me check something quick here. Okay. Yeah. Now, that's exactly what has happened. As soon as the Defender for Identity portal detects that the installation has been completed, then it allows you to finish up what you're doing. Yeah. So if you look here, we should see installation completed successfully. And in our sensor, we would see we now have our domain controller here. This will start and it will be fine. Just give it a second. And we have just onboarded Defender for Identity, a domain controller to Defender for Identity. We also want to make sure we have the right integration. So we want to have it integrated with Defender for Endpoints. The idea is to have everything well integrated with each other. Okay, what else? What else? So for this one, this gives us the basic installation. Once you have your domain controllers reporting here, you are actually going to be able to, there's a learning process for a couple of things, but it's also going to be sending specific Active Directory security information in here. And just to give you an idea of what some of those are, let me show you. So some of the kind of alerts you would be seeing, and we also have very good documentation about this. For example, if we add a user to a sensitive group, it will flag it. If you have a suspicious VPN connection from a user, it will flag it. If you have a suspicious service being created, it will flag it, for example. So we will at some point also try to generate what just disconnected. We will try to generate alerts for Defender for endpoints. What's wrong with this connection? Okay, so let's come here. Now, remember, we want to onboard the device also to Sentinel directly. There is a difference with sending alerts and incidents from Microsoft 365 here to onboarding to Sentinel. When you onboard a device to Sentinel, what it does is it sends all the raw logs on the device. So what do I mean by raw logs? Let me show you the logs I'm talking of. Every system has a repository of logs. So if you go to the event viewer of a system, for a Windows system, you go to the security events. So every event being logged here in the security events will be sent to Sentinel if you onboard a device to Sentinel. Now remember, these are logs, not alerts. They are security logs. So some of the security logs are just informational. Some of them, you know, by virtue of their severity, they are high severity, they are critical. But the idea is, using the illustration of the basket of oranges, you want to capture all logs so that you can search through your logs if there is anything out of the ordinary. And Sentinel will do the work for you. So where you have a user login to a device, for example, this event, an account was successfully logged on. It's not a security alert where something has gone wrong. But what happens when in the future there is a logon activity that's related to the security alert? You want that kind of information to be available. So what we do for that is we onboard the device to Sentinel so that it can send all its logs. And we can just do that by running this MMA agent. We agree. Sorry, just a second. I'm anticipating some noise in a few seconds. Okay, no noise. It's the key, sorry. So we're connecting to Azure Log Analytics, and it's going to ask for a workspace ID. We're going to grab our workspace ID from here. Azure Sentinel, workspace settings, agents management, and we grab the workspace ID here, and we drop it in here. Requires a key. We grab the key here, and we drop it in here. What's going to change? Right now, we see there is no Windows computer onboarded to Azure Sentinel. So once we do this, once we install this agent, the agent is going to report to this workspace. And once it reports to this workspace, it starts sending all its logs from the device all the way to Sentinel. And then Sentinel can start making sense of some of the logs that we see. So in the world of log aggregators, every information is important. What might not be relevant today will definitely be relevant tomorrow. When you go
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello? I can hear you. Hello? I wasn't sure if there was a question there. Okay. In the window. So every information is relevant, and it may or may not be relevant at the point in time where you are having the information. But you see, data is really critical. So we're going to collect all the data, all the security logs from the domain controller. And when we collect those information, we can search through them. We can look for specific things. We just install the agent. There is one way you can verify if the agent installed successfully on the device. You just go to the control panel and you would see Microsoft monitoring agents. So let me enlarge this. Change the category to large. Microsoft monitoring agents. And if you check our log analytics, you will see the status. The agent has successfully connected to Microsoft Operations Management Suite service. So we know it's been onboarded. So let's go over to Sentinel and see what we see here. So I'm just going to refresh this. Agents management again. So let's give it a minute. This will change to one Windows computer. And at least we verify that it was onboarded successfully. So we know it was onboarded successfully. Give it a few minutes. Close this. We'll give it a few minutes, and we could even be a bit impatient by running the query that searches for all devices that have onboarded. So let's give it a few minutes. It would show up on this portal. So right now we've been able to onboard the domain controller to Defender for Identity. We've been able to onboard it to Azure Sentinel. We also have it on Azure on Defender for Endpoints. Azure Defender will take it up from here because Azure Defender already is going to manage anything that's within our log analytics workspace. So this would also change and tell us we have one server. So let's give it some time. Sentinel, we come back here. So we can see the kind of information we're receiving. For Azure Sentinel, when you are in the Azure Sentinel space, if you come down here to News and Guides, there is a very good Azure Sentinel training that takes you from nothing all the way to being a ninja in Azure Sentinel. So if you click that portal, you would see a very good self-guide on learning Azure Sentinel. But this is not to storm you with a lot of learning. The learning path for being a security operations analyst has an area where it also touches on Sentinel. So let me just show you that area. So here, that's where we start doing things like configuring Azure Sentinel. The learning path gives you a lot of information in that. We've breezed through this, but when you go through the learning path, you will start seeing a lot of familiarity because we just walked through it. Queries using Custo query language. I'm waiting for those events to come up. Connecting logs to Sentinel, so you could connect a syslog server. You could onboard, like we just onboarded a Windows device, for example, and then performing threat hunting. So you will find all of that in the learning path. And you have the capabilities all in here, where you have hunting, you have a lot of hunting queries, you have data connectors, you have a very good visual representation of data in workbooks. So if you go to workbooks and search, you would see a lot of very good information that you can just see by looking. One of my favorite workbooks is Identity and Access. And if you go to Identity and Access, you would be able to see identity and access information of what has been configured in Sentinel. So from Azure, from Office 365. You'll be able to find all of those things. So this is still loading up, so give it some time. It's looking for security events, and it will get the security events from our workspace. So let's go to our workspace, agent management. Now we have one Windows computer connected. And if you try to verify which Windows computer is connected, it would show you that there is one device. Yeah, one device. And this is the device, lab DC, lab domain, because we onboarded it. It means also if we come to Azure Security Center and we want to ensure Azure Defender is taking care of this device, let's just check here. Yep, now we have one server here. So we have one server onboarded to Azure Defender. And as we receive information on this server, a lot of it will be showing up in here. And so most of what we were doing was basically configuring what exactly, configuring the environment to accept or to bring in the information. We want alerts, we want incidents, we want device health, we want all of that showing up in here. So let's go back here. Azure Sentinel. Incidents, we don't have any new incidents. Close this up. Yeah, so we have this. Some of the kind of things we want to also simulate is there are, if we want to simulate alerts that come in here, remember we said if we're adding a user to a sensitive group, we want to be able to capture that. So I'm just going to create a regular user, a new user. Call it test user. It's the same login name. I'll give it a password. So we just created a user called test user. One of the sensitive groups in some of the sensitive groups in Active Directory is domain admin, device admin, and so if we add this user to this group, it does trigger a security alert because it's telling us a user has been added to a group. So if we come in here, let me see. A member was added to a security enabled universal group. Count name, login to. Yep, and define. So this is an event ID 4756. We expect this event to be sent to Sentinel, and we also expect this event to be flagged in Defender for identity because it is a security alert. So we'll give this some time and it will pop up also. Let me just do something quick. So it needs to send all the data from the domain controller. So from an onboarding, one of the things we've been able to do is, this is basically preparing the environment. The more devices you have onboarded to Defender for Endpoints, Sentinel, for example, the more alerts you have triggered or generated, they will show up in the portals. So the objective is, which is where we can start going into whatever challenges we're having with, say, onboarding, accessing the portals, we can really go into that. But one thing I wanted us to achieve here is to be able to set up the environments, configure the environments, and allow you to use the environments over the next couple of weeks for your learning. As you go through the study guide would require you, being familiar with a couple of things. You can just hop into this environment so that you are able to see some of the data that is being referred to here. So that's one thing I wanted us to be able to achieve in here. Just 1 second. I want to be sure we have data here. Yep, I want cloud discovery logs. Okay, so I know we have gone way longer than we planned. So what I would do here is we can close out, but just before we close out, keep the communication lines open. So if you want us to spend time doing things like configuring accessing the lab, those errors that are related to not having access to the portals, yes, we can spend time for that. What I can offer also is feel free to reach out while this lab is still active. If there's any specific thing I need to help you with, if we can, I think I can accommodate another, let's call it a troubleshooting session where getting familiar with some of these things and also having the right access we can do. And we can have that session. Maybe we can all agree on when you would like us to have that session. It can be later today, it can be tomorrow. But it will be good if any issues that you have, we have all those collated so we can address everything in that session with everyone who is affected. So with this, we're able to have the integrations done and you have your environments ready to play with. That's what this does for you. While you study, you would find some of these things and you will have that, I will call it aha moment, where you're like, oh, this is what it means. You can easily do that within the portal. So tell me. You are welcome, Opolanle. I would encourage you to go through this study guide. It's one. So there's something we say in when it comes to managing this environment. The best experience you get is from accessing the portals, but the best foundation knowledge is from going through the study material. So the study material gives you a good explanation on why you see what you see in here. And so you have both of them, and both of them is helpful for you. So we can stop this here now. And if you want to stay on for specific things, yeah, we can.